episode of the second season of the Detours in Music podcast. My name is Laura Rupel, and today I have an incredible interview with Dr. Nancy Ambrose King, internationally acclaimed oboist and professor of oboe at the University of Michigan. I hope you enjoy.
Hi, I'm Nancy Ambrose King, and I'm the professor of oboe at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here. My first question for you is, how did you get your start in music?
Sure. Well, I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and all of us played an instrument when we were growing up, and we all sang in the choir. I think there's something about growing up in a big family in the 1960s that all of us did the same things. Like, we all had to play an instrument. We all did take piano lessons. If we were girls, we all took ballet. We were all on the swim team. I mean, we just basically did the same things. And my mother was an amateur musician. My brother became a high school band director. So yeah, music was very much a part of my growing up.
Did you start oboe at a younger age, or when did that start for you?
Yeah, I started the oboe when I was 10, and I was in elementary school in 4th grade, and there was a woodwind quintet from the Detroit Symphony that came and gave a little concert at my school. And the oboist, who was the principal oboist of the Detroit Symphony at the time, Arno Mariotti, he was sort of the leader of the group and the spokesman and did all the talking. And he was so warm and jovial and just a wonderful representative for the oboe and for his group. And I came home from school that day in 4th grade, and I told my mom I wanted to play the oboe and I wanted that man to be my teacher. And it actually ended up being exactly that way. And he was my teacher for 10 years.
Wow, that's excellent. When was it that you realized you would want to go into music professionally?
Well, I went back and forth several times in high school. Music was always such an important part of my life, but I was also very interested in academics, and I wanted to go to a university where I could have the full scenario of a great music school, but also have the option of high-level academic classes, so that I could explore as many avenues as possible and not be limited in any way at that point in my life. But once I got to college, and then I experienced the joys of being in a music school and the joys of having musician friends and colleagues, then I knew that I wanted to continue along that path.
And you did your undergrad at the University of Michigan, so that's a full circle.
It sure is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Mr. Mariotti, who was my teacher from the time I was 10, was teaching at the University of Michigan at that time.
Okay.
So I basically just continued with him, and he was my teacher for the first 2 years at Michigan, and then Harry Sargis came after that. And going to Michigan was also very much a part of my family dynamic, because my father had gone to Michigan, and I had a brother and a sister that went to Michigan, and lots of cousins. And so it was a little bit of a school spirit issue too.
Yeah. After your time at the University of Michigan, you studied with Richard Kilmer at Eastman, correct?
Yes, yeah, I did. I am so fortunate to have had Mr. Kilmer as a huge influence in my life. And actually, I believe that Mr. Kilmer had just been hired at Eastman the year before I auditioned. And I was a senior at Michigan in my undergrad, and I was talking with one of the older oboists in the studio who was a graduate student at that time. And she said, if you're looking at graduate schools, I would definitely audition at Eastman because they've hired this incredible new oboe professor, Richard Kilmer. And he's going to be just fabulous there. And so, yeah, so I did, and I'm very grateful. I did a master's and then later returned for a doctorate.
What are some advice you have for younger players, maybe particularly during COVID season or just in general?
Yeah. Well, we definitely are in an unprecedented time right now, and I think it's affecting all of us, but in many ways, it's bringing out some inner strengths and resilience and flexibility that we all have, but haven't always had to call upon. I think the most important advice that I have for students who encounter upheaval or things just don't go as they had planned is to remind them that anytime one door closes, another opens. And it's sometimes very difficult to see those other doors because you can be so intent upon going through the door that you have planned and that you've thought about and you prepared for. And so I think it's human nature to continue to bang on that door, even though it's closed and doesn't mean it's closed forever, but at this point it's closed. And so sometimes we don't even see that there's other doors wide open all around us, but we're so intent on the one that we've prepared, that we wanted to walk through, that we don't see them. So I think just being aware of the opportunities and being aware of the flexibility that it needs, but also how that can benefit us in our future. The resilience and flexibility are so important in life, and this year is a good chance to really draw upon that and maybe dig down into some strengths that most of us didn't know we had.
That's definitely true. I know a lot of musicians, maybe oboists in particular, tend to like a plan and want everything to work out a certain way. So I'm sure people listening can relate to banging on a door that's already closed, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and it's good to have a plan. I think it's really good to have a goal, and it keeps us motivated and keeps us ambitious. But life is a long process, and being a musician is a long process. And there are often times that the journey itself is more important than the goal. So, for instance, I've had many students that had great intentions of entering a competition, and they went as far as learning all of the repertoire, and it came time to actually enter, and they realized, oh, I have so many irons in the fire, and I can't really devote the time right now to that. But what they realized is the process of learning the repertoire was actually more important to them than the goal that they had set for themselves. And they became a better musician. They became a better oboist by going through that process. And I think this may be, the COVID time, may be a chance for us to realize that this is a journey that we're on, and the goal will still be there a year from now. But what we gain from the process of walking through this journey that we're on right now will enable us to reach our goal, perhaps even more so than if we hadn't encountered this difficulty.
Exactly. Off topic a little bit, what would you be doing if you were not a musician?
Well, my father was a physician. He was a surgeon. and I grew up in that environment that was always had a lot of interesting discussions, and very he was also very interested in history, and we had a lot of very thought-provoking conversations around the dinner table as I was growing up. So I did actually have to face the possibility of not being able to play the oboe again when I was in a severe car accident. And I did actually have to think very carefully about not if I can't play the oboe again, but it looks likely that I will not be able to. So what will I do? And yeah, I think the clearest path for me was to follow in my father's footsteps in some way in the healthcare field.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I am always very interested in nurturing and helping other people.
I had a question from a podcast listener that kind of has to do with what you're talking about a little bit, about thinking that playing oboe might be gone, or like the process of, I guess, practicing starting from zero maybe again. He said, when you returned to playing the oboe and you came up against the struggle of feeling as if your sound or technique should be as it was before, but you're not hearing what you wanted to hear, how did you push past that challenge mentally and physically? For context, this person recently returned to the oboe after 4 years of not playing, and what I'm hearing is not the sound I feel I am capable of producing.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, when I came back, and it wasn't 4 years, it was a year and a half to 2 years that I was unable to play. I also came back, well, a little bit of context, I was in a very severe car accident, and I had a lot of facial injuries as well as my arm and my hand. So when I came back to playing, it was so foreign to me because, not to be too graphic, but I had new teeth and I had a jaw that had been, broken and fixed, and I had no feeling in my lower lip whatsoever, and this severe nerve damage in the lower lip from the impact. And that lower lip numbness continued almost 20 years later. I can feel now in my lower lip, but it went for years and years without being able to feel, and at least on the right side of my lower lip. So I really did feel that I had to start from scratch. However, I felt that once again, it was an opportunity that I had because I knew what I wanted out of the oboe, but yet I wasn't 10 years old anymore. So I had the opportunity of really thinking hard about how I was going to go about this. Like, where exactly was I going to place the reed on my lower lip? And where were my corners? I was really thinking as an adult, as a 26-year-old. I looked at it as an opportunity to begin the oboe again with the knowledge I had accumulated from playing the oboe over so many years, but without perhaps any of the bad habits that we all fall into. Whether it's, things that we had just started when we were 10 years old, doing it with the oboe. So I think, with every setback, it does provide opportunity. I also found it really wonderful to go back to very beginning etude books and go back and play slow Barrett melodic studies and really focus in on things that when I was a youngster, I just sort of glossed through and played an etude for my teacher, and that was it. Never played it again. So, I can definitely understand and sympathize with your podcast listener. I do think that the way we sound and how we play, it's our voice. It's very unique to us, and it's in our head
Mm-hmm.
more than it is in our muscles, and it's in our ear. And I, I really think that once your listener builds up the strength of
Mm-hmm.
the embouchure again and finds that the muscles are behaving in a way that he or she would like,
Mm-hmm.
that the sound that's in her ear will be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I learned a lot from your interview with Double Reed Dish about your accident, and I um, remember thinking, oh, you must have absolutely perfect technique because you had, degrees in oboe playing, and then you were able to really be meticulous about how you restarted. So it could be a good opportunity for all of us, I guess, if we ever take a small break to really try to do what we would want, like if we were teaching, what we would recommend someone to be doing.
Yeah, and on a positive note,
Mm-hmm.
I really believe that the muscles that we use to play the oboe in our facial muscles are quite small. So they atrophy very quickly,
Mm-hmm.
but they build up quite quickly as well.
Okay.
So I'm not sure there's a huge difference between taking 3 weeks off from playing and 3 years off from playing, because once the muscle tone is gone, it's gone. But they're small muscles and they can be built up very quickly. So, I mean, maybe that means don't take 3 weeks off, but it also means if you encounter a setback that really requires a significant amount of time away from the oboe, you can return.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not going to take the 10 years that it took originally to reach that point.
Have you changed your career focus in your professional life?
Um, well, definitely, as we were talking about, I think I I definitely changed my career focus out of necessity, and it turned out to be one of the best things in my life, because the end result was that I found myself in what I consider my true calling,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't be happier about my career and my um, position at the University of Michigan, and my position as someone who advocates and hopefully inspires young students. So, yeah, I'm not quite sure that actually would have happened if it weren't for the car accident, because I was definitely following a path that was taking me through auditions, and I was playing actually at the time in Pittsburgh when I was in the car accident. I had a master's degree. It had never occurred to me to get a doctorate.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was in the car accident, and then I took a year and a half off, and I decided, okay, I've had 9 surgeries by that point. I think I might be able to try this again. And it really was because of Richard Kilmer that I owe him everything, that I was able to continue, because he accepted me at Eastman for a doctorate, knowing that it could be that I wouldn't be able to complete the degree, because we really didn't know at that point. I mean, I was able to play a little bit, but certainly not what I had been able to do when I graduated with my master's degree. Um, so yeah, I think that path that I wouldn't probably have followed if I wasn't forced to really consider, okay, what is the next step for me? Oh, okay, I have to learn the oboe again. I need some help. I think I would like a doctorate. And then I realized through the process of beginning to play again, but also being in that academic environment of the doctoral program at Eastman, which was so inspiring and stimulating. I realized that, I really felt at home in that environment. And also I felt like I had something to offer that, as a pedagogue, that perhaps I had a unique perspective because of the experiences that I had come through. And it took me on that path, and it just, I am very grateful. Not that I would want to go through the car accident to get to that path if I had to do it over again, but as I said, some unexpected things sometimes take you to unexpected places that end up being where you were meant to be in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah. How would you define detour in your life?
A detour is just the perfect word for your podcast, because a detour doesn't necessarily end in a different location than you originally intended. So sometimes, or most of the time, when you take a detour, you actually end up exactly where you meant to be in the first place, but you took a different path to get there. And sometimes a detour can be very frustrating. In fact, most of the time it's frustrating because you're, in the literal sense of the word, you're trying to get to the airport or something, and you have a plan of when you want to get to the airport and how you want to get to the airport, and all of a sudden the road is closed and there's a detour. But fighting the detour isn't going to help. I mean, you can't go through the road that's closed. You can't block that off. You're not going to get to the airport at all that way. So you have to go around and follow a new path. And oftentimes you see some landscape, or you see a part of the city on that detour that you wouldn't have otherwise. And maybe it took you a little longer to get to the airport, but you are a wiser person. You've encountered things, you've seen things along the way, that if you had just stayed on the interstate the whole way, you wouldn't have grown in that way. You wouldn't have experienced, the places and people and things that you saw along the way on the detour.
Exactly.
So I think we tend to think of the word detour in the negative sense. And we see it and we think, oh, now I'm going to be late, or now I'm not going to get where I need to go. But I think detour can be equally positive. In fact, maybe more positive than negative, if you're open to the experience that it brings.
With the podcast, like you were saying, everyone I interview is a professional in this field, so they are at that destination, but there's no way that everyone took the same path. And I think as a younger student looking up at everyone, I used to think that everyone had taken the same path or had to have taken the same path, which is part of what inspired me to ask these questions, because even some people I ask say, no, I didn't have an interesting, I think I followed all the normal steps. And I'm saying, I don't think that's possible, because it's only normal because that's what we're all telling each other, but nobody had the same experience. So it's nice to hear that it all ended up at the destination.
Yeah. And I think it is very easy, especially when you're in school, in college, or in a conservatory. It is very easy to think that there's a prescribed way to get from point A to point B, and that you must do this in your freshman year, and you must go to this music festival in the summer, and you must do this and this. I often find that students come in as freshmen with these ideas of, this is what I want to be, this is how I want to get there. And I just sit back and wait, and sometimes it goes exactly as they have planned it, but most of the time they grow in a way in college that they hadn't even expected that they would grow. And they become interested in a type of music or a genre of music, or sometimes not an area in music, that they find extremely inspiring. And they find that, oh, it's that focus is taking me in a different direction than I ever would have thought of when I had this prescribed path that, you know, everyone said I had to follow. So I really do feel that there's so many opportunities around us, and life is just filled with unexpected twists and turns, and it's how we react to those. And of course, you know, they're not always easy by any stretch of the imagination, but the resilience and the flexibility is so important in how we manage what we may view as a setback.
Yeah.
And COVID is teaching or making us realize how resilient we are. And I am just so profoundly impressed with all of my students who have just shown unbelievable strength and flexibility, resilience, the ability to adapt. And that life skill is so crucial and will carry them very well in life, throughout life.
None of us expected this, of course, but I think now that the year is coming to a close, I think we're all realizing a lot of things we can be thankful for that we've learned this year, for sure.
Definitely.
What brought you to the job that you're in today?
Well, at the University of Michigan, I've been here 20 years now. Before I came here, I was teaching at the University of Illinois. And I was there for 7 years, and I think this was in my 7th year, and the position opened up at Michigan. And of course, since this is my alma mater, it was a real dream to be able to return to the school. And you know, I came back, and it was you know, they had built new additions, and the school looked different in many ways, and the area had grown so much, but it was so much the same. It felt so familiar, and there were even professors of mine from college, you know, 18 years prior, that were still there, and now were my colleagues. And you know, it really was a dream, and I'm very happy, so happy to be here.
Yeah, that's a sweet image, I think.
Yeah.
What are your current goals for your studio, your field, or just in your job right now?
Sure. I think my goal is always to be the very best advocate for my students that I possibly can be, to help them to reach their full potential, to help them to enjoy the oboe and the art of playing the oboe, the art of being a musician in their life and for the rest of their life. I also feel that my goal as their teacher is to be a teacher that is unique to each one of them. So unique to each student's needs and to their goals and to their learning style. So I'm perhaps a little bit of a different teacher for every student that walks through the door, and perhaps even to the same student on a different week. Because everyone has their own personal journey, and I find it very fulfilling to advocate and assist each student on their journey. And everyone has a very different path, as we've talked about And I guess if I have any other goal, the ultimate goal of any teacher, I hope, is to reach the point where the student doesn't need them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So that ultimately we want to be such a good teacher that the students have the skills and the tools they need when they leave
Mm-hmm.
to be their own teacher for the rest of their life. Because when you think about it, the time that you will spend as an oboist playing the oboe, the time that we actually have a teacher every week is quite a small percentage of an entire person's career.
Mm-hmm.
And the bulk of someone's career as an oboist or as a musician is spent as being your own teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and listening to yourself as perhaps your teacher would, addressing the positives and the negatives that are there. And so I feel if I do have an ultimate goal for my studio, it's yes, to be their advocate for their entire life, but to reach the point where they don't need me to be their teacher anymore because they have the skills to do it on their own.
Yeah. So they'll have you in the back of their heads.
Yeah, and I still think of every once in a while I'll be playing the oboe and something will pop into my head of something that a teacher told me years and years ago, maybe 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And and perhaps actually at the time that the teacher said that to me, I didn't quite understand it. I wasn't able to process it or completely internalize the suggestion, but clearly it stuck with me somewhere
Mm-hmm.
in the back of my mind. And I every once in a while it'll happen. I'll play and I'll think, oh yeah, now I understand why, X, Y, or Z was said to me at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully that the echoes of my teaching and my advice will be there forever. Yeah, you were so resourceful in sending along some quotes for me to ponder. And there was a quote that you sent from Leonard Bernstein that said, to achieve great things, two things are needed: a plan and not quite enough time. And I chuckled at that when I first read it. And then I realized that really resonates with me because I've always been so busy. I mean, I have many facets to my life, and I'm a teacher, professor, and I'm a performer, and I record. I have two children who are now adults, and I have hobbies, and I do feel like I have a lot of irons in the fire.
Mm-hmm.
And one time when I was president of IDRS, actually, and I was, running around at a conference with so many things to do, and I had to play my own recital at the time. And someone asked me, "Oh, can you take care of this?" And I said, "Yeah, of course, I'll take care of that." And then someone else had heard it. Actually, it was Gordon Hunt. Gordon Hunt came up to me and he said, "I've heard this great quote, if you want something done, ask a busy person." And you're the perfect example of that. And I laughed. And then I thought about that. And I thought, yeah, time management is crucial. And people who are busy and people who have a lot of things going on, juggling a lot of aspects in their life, have out of necessity had to learn how to have really good management skills with their time. So I think that Bernstein's quote of having a plan, having a goal, knowing what you want to achieve, whether it's short term or long term or somewhere in the middle, but then not quite enough time really motivates you to use the time that you have to be very proficient at managing it, and maybe not doing 3 or 4 things at the same time, but really focusing very intently on the one thing that you are taking care of at that time. So I think there's another quote that people say, well, it's not a quote, but they'll say, oh, women can have it all. You can have everything. You can have, family and children and marriage and a great career. And that's 100% true. And we're so fortunate to live at a time when we can have it all. But I would say that it's not possible to have it all at the same time.
I know that following you on your social medias, I'm often astounded by how diverse and how much you seem to be doing all the time. You'll be in a state running a marathon, and then I feel like the next day, like a recording comes out, the next day you're giving a master class. So if you say it's all time management skills, that's inspiring for sure.
Well, you're very organized, obviously, and you've put together this great podcast, and I have no doubt you will also be able to juggle whatever comes along.
Well, thank you.
Your way in life.
Thank you. I really, again, appreciate you taking the time to do this. It meant a lot to me, and I'm excited for people to get to hear it.
Wonderful.
I hope you all were able to enjoy that interview as much as I enjoyed being able to speak with Dr. King. I will forever be grateful for having that time with her to learn more about her life. I think Dr. King is an incredible example, obviously, of resilience and perseverance after going through an accident and continuing to focus on what she loved, which was the oboe. Even after pondering a career outside of the oboe, she went back to it and became stronger than ever. I also think her concept of banging on a door that's already closed when there might be an open door right next to you that you just hadn't thought about maybe is really prevalent right now, because I'm sure many people listening had plans that did not go as expected this past year during the coronavirus pandemic. And sometimes it doesn't just take a pandemic for a door to close that you wanted to be open, but just to stay motivated and believe in yourself, do what you need to do, let yourself have passions, and see where things take you. If you'd like to keep up with the podcast, there are multiple ways you can do so. First of all, you can go to our website, which is detoursandmusicpodcast.weebly.com. You could also subscribe to our YouTube channel, also called Detours and Music Podcast. We also have a Facebook page and Instagram account where you can like and follow us. The Detours and Music Podcast is available everywhere that you listen to podcasts, but on Apple Music podcast apps, you can subscribe and rate us. If you ever want to get in touch with me and give more direct feedback, you can email me at detoursandmusicpodcast@gmail.com. As always, thank you for listening, and I hope you catch the next one.